Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this morning's Zoom webinar presented by the Chamber of Commerce for Greater Moncton. The title of today's webinar is People and Productivity During the Pandemic. My name is John Wishart. I'm CEO of the Chamber, and I'll be the moderator for today's presentation. Bonjour à tous, bienvenue au webinaire Zoom de ce matin, présenté par la Chambre de Commerce pour le Grand Moncton. Le titre du webinaire d'aujourd'hui est Les gens et la productivité pendant la pandémie. Je m'appelle John Wishart, je suis le PDG de la Chambre et je serai le modérateur de la présentation d'aujourd'hui. We're very pleased to have with us today two people who will walk us through this new world of working from home, working remotely during this unprecedented time. Carolyn Watson is an HR professional, has her own firm. She has more than 20 years experience in the field. And Jennifer Kikkert is founder and owner of Visualiz Management Consulting, which specializes in process improvement, culture change, and operational excellence for employers and their employees. Merci beaucoup, Carolyn et Jennifer, d'avoir accepté d'être avec nous aujourd'hui. For those of you who are new to the Zoom platform, it combines both video and audio functionality, but we are muting all your microphones with the exception of our two presenters and myself. As you can imagine, it could get a little chaotic with close to 70 people online, all trying to speak at the same time. Que vous pouvez l'imaginer, cela pourrait devenir un peu chaotique avec plusieurs personnes en ligne essayant de parler en même temps. So here is how today's webinar will proceed. After I finish my introductory remarks, Carolyn and Jen will both give, I think, about a 10 to 15 minute presentation. They each have some slides. That will be followed by a Q&A with you who are on the call. But rather than speaking the question, we'll ask you to use the chat function, which you'll find at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And you can pose a question at any time during the session. I'll keep track of those and try my best to pose as many as possible during our time. So with that, I'll give the virtual floor over to, I believe, Carolyn, you're going to start?
Yep.
And then we'll move right into Jen, and then we'll have our Q&A. So Carolyn, the floor is yours.
Perfect, thank you. I'm going to see if I can put the slide up here. I'm going to go here and here. So everyone can see the slide?
Yes, yes.
All right, perfect. So, you know, as I was starting to pull the information together and prepare for this morning's session, I started thinking about, you know, what kind of case studies can I rely on, or, you know, information from the past. But, you know, this is a first for everyone. There's no handbook that gives us the instructions on how businesses to deal through a global pandemic. However, there is, we've all experienced stress and moments of crisis in our own personal lives, or in, you know, individually or with businesses. And I can certainly think of a lot of examples, and I'm sure you have a lot of examples yourselves. One particular story that comes to mind for me where I experienced a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress in one particular moment was early on in my career. I had to fly from Moncton to Toronto, and you know, everything was fine. You know, flight was on time, takeoff was smooth, but it wasn't long into the flight that I started to notice things were getting a little off. First sign was, you know, those little air vents, the air conditioning vents that usually spouts out cool air. Well, they were starting to get a little warm, and it was to the point that it was piping hot. So you'd see a lot of people in the plane sort of turning it off. And then at one point, we saw the flight attendants with a big yellow book walking briskly towards the back of the plane. So as I turned around, I saw that there was smoke coming out from the back of the plane. So quite stressful and quite a moment of anxiety, and everyone in the plane was really quiet. But what I do remember, what sticks to mind, is how the pilot continually kept us posted and continually gave us very clear messaging. I still can hear it in my brain. I can see it here in my head. You know, he kept saying, please remain seated, please remain calm, and he would inform us. And at one point he said, we're turning the plane around, we're flying back towards the Moncton airport. Please leave the aisles free for our well-trained flight attendants to deal with the situation. And then at one point he came back on and said, you know, good news, the flight attendant have successfully extinguished the fire. It was the cooling unit that had caught fire, and nothing else in the plane has been impacted. Everything is good. We are going to turn around and resume our flight to Toronto. Now, was I calm and cool? No, my heart rate was pounding pretty fast. However, what did help was that the pilot was leading us through this whole thing by giving us very clear information and by updating us and telling us what he knew at that time, so that we didn't, you know, it didn't turn into a chaotic situation. And so that's what Jen and I are hoping to share with you today is, you know, focusing on people and productivity. How are you going to ensure that you're leading well and the people are in a good position, and that productivity is continuing, and that you can plow on through the current situation that we're experiencing. So we'll give you some quick tips, and some of the stuff you'll be able to use immediately and at no cost. So the slide here, you'll see that there is that you're very familiar, probably, if you've seen a version of this curve and flattening the curve. And I'd like to draw the parallels with you know, with how you're going to cope yourself and with your teams, and how you're going to lead through these uncertain times, and through forming partnerships. So these are proactive measures you can take to sort of flatten that curve of the impact on your teams and on yourself and on your businesses. So these are things that you can do to reduce these effects from the COVID-19 virus. So I'll read this in case some of you don't see the screen clearly. But in Canada, the cost of lost productivity due to mental health and or addiction is $8 billion per year. So, you know, this is also before, this information is from before what we're currently experiencing, our current events. So obviously there's probably, it could be even greater. So now is the time for you to take those proactive measures in order to reduce those costs that are going to impact your businesses. And those are, you know, not just by working in isolation. There's some proactive measures you can do to take care of yourself and your team, and to lead well during these situations. So unlike the COVID-19, stress symptoms can vary, and they're not as clear, and they're not as specific as other illnesses. Stress can create a lot of things. It can, you know, don't be surprised if yourself and your team is lacking focus, if there's a decreased productivity, lack of motivation, emotional outbursts. People, you know, are experiencing under a lot of stress. If you're seeing that they're not communicating as much, those are signs that could be that they're really having a hard time dealing with this situation. It cannot, these behaviors won't be eliminated, but there is something that you can do to flatten that curve. So be on the lookout for those specific examples and more, and be conscious about checking in on people and making sure that they're doing okay, because these are more subtle, and they have a long-term effect. I'll read this one too. This is a Stephen R. Covey. So proactive people focus their efforts on the part of this is hidden for me, on the circle of influence. They work on these things they can do something about. And I think this particular quote really reflects what is important in these times. And in my research on on resilience and dealing with stress, the one common theme that keeps coming up is the sense of control that you have in the matter. Not focusing on what you have no control over. Right now, we can't control that we have to work in isolation. Those are things that we just have to deal with, and now this is the new normal. What do you have control over? What does your team have control over? And focusing on those things. The one study that really represents, I find that really demonstrates this example well, is there's a classic experiment that's been done on stress where the participants have to do a number of tasks that requires a lot of concentration, but during the testing, there's this uncomfortable loud noise that goes off every random moment. The reaction from the participants is that there's the increased sweating, the sweat rate, the heart rate, blood pressure, everything goes up, and they have a harder time to struggle with the focusing, and they made more mistakes. Many gave up. And so what they did is they did the same classic experiment, but they provided sort of an escape for the attendees. And so they introduced the button. And so they gave this button to every participant and asked them and said, if you need to escape and you need to stop at some point, you can press the button and you'll be able to resume afterwards. And so what's not surprisingly, what happened is that there was a lot less errors and there was a lot less mistakes, and the stress level went down, the heart rate level went down, everything. But the surprising thing was that nobody ended up pressing the button. And so what we learned from this is that they knew that they could, the moment that that you can stop something, or it gave them a sense of control. And so you may ask yourself, well, how does this apply to us in real life? How can we get some control over things? And what you can control is your reactions and your emotions. And focusing on what can we do from here? What are the things that we have control over versus why is this happening to us? And really trying to take proactive measures to adapt to this new normal for now. Examples of that is some companies have EFAPs, employee and family assistance programs. Encourage your team to reach out. This is a time, it's usually, I think this is usually, all companies have this at no cost. So they can provide services over the phone. I have a client who was telling me the other day that they have a push-up challenge, so that they're all working from their own homes. And so to stay active, they're doing some push-ups and seeing who can do the most. There's things you can do to add a bit of fun, but also keep people moving and focused on other things. Not watching the news 24/7 is also a thing that's within your control. Creating flexible schedules. The list goes on. There's a lot of things, if you put your mind to it, you can really do some things to reduce the stress. So we're leading through uncertain times, of course, and if you think about the story of the pilot, you might want to ask yourself, how well am I leading my team and or myself through these situations? Am I informing them as well? Am I keeping them in the loop? Am I guiding them? Sort of like the pilot, he kept us very clear on what was going on, and we were very clear on what we were supposed to do. Remain seated. There's no ands, ifs, or buts. Are you also taking the opportunity to, adapt to new roles, or have your teams adapt to new roles? And focusing on some of the good things, the positive things that are happening. We're hearing some good stories as well. So if we'll look at these quickly. So in terms of informing, are you in touch with your team? Are you talking to them as often as you would if you were in the office? If not, you should be probably having more contact with them. And probably more than you realize, because there's a lot of people out there that need that contact and that need that social interaction. You may not have all the answers either, You may not, and they might have a lot of questions, and that's okay. You don't need to make up any stories. You can tell them what you know, be honest and transparent. And you know, otherwise they're going to make their own stories. They're going to make their own conclusions, and trust me, it's probably going to be worse than what reality is. So stay in touch with them. There's ways to do it through Zoom. This is a great tool, over the phone. But FaceTime is probably a really good way to do it, so that you have that gives it more of that personal interaction. And it's okay to be vulnerable during these times. And to guide, you know, are you focusing on like the nitty-gritty details, or are you know, the strict rules versus the standards? What are the standards really? Excuse me. Focus on the priorities. I have a friend who called me last week who was really frustrated. Her manager asked her to spend a day working on a project that she knew was going to be canceled and put off until the fall. But her manager insisted that she needed to provide all the information and finish her part of the project by the end of the day. And of course, the next day, it was announced that the project was canceled. So needless to say, she was quite frustrated. And you know, whether the manager was just trying to make work, or I'm not sure why that person decided to do that, but I can tell you that that employee was quite unhappy and quite frustrated, and really didn't need that during these times. So no make work, focus on the priorities, what's important, and be realistic. And it's also a great time to provide some online training and encourage them to do some online training if they want to learn some other things. Creating new identities. There's in 2008, I think it was a company, a manufacturing company that created cans, and what they did is they asked people, the government needed them to reduce the energy consumption, so they asked their employees to come up with some new ideas, and these were manufacturers. So they changed their titles to inventors, and they asked them to come up with a lot of ideas and to think innovatively on how to reduce the energy consumption. And they averaged about 142.2 ideas per inventor. And as a result, they ended up not only reducing their energy by, I think it was 35%, that was the requirement. They reduced it by even more and were able to charge that extra money back to the government. And so taking those opportunities to allow those people to be creative and innovative is a good time to try that out. You know, those folks that have all those ideas and want to try their take a stab at something, maybe now's a good time to do that. And again, training, there's a lot of online training that is available. And you know, there's a lot of things that are coming out of this. Bauer, I read that, you know, because hockey season is ended, they've started creating masks for the health professionals. So they have the tools and they can do it. So what can you do to adapt to this new reality? And finding the bright spots. Well, you know, I can tell you, my kids now realize that they miss school. So there is a silver lining. There are a lot of good stories that are coming out of this. I'm hearing a lot of things in the business community, people that are taking opportunities to focus on what's the good things that are going on. And you know, there's I have a client who was telling me they had been wanting for the longest time to try out online training for their clients, and so now's the time. They're running and they're doing that, and they're being successful, and they're creating a lot of online training for their clients. So they've been putting this off for a while, and now's the time to do it. So try not to get overwhelmed with all the unknowns, and try to focus on those little moments that there are some silver linings. And so the last one is forming partnerships, and you want to, you know, make sure you're supporting your community. You're not alone in there, and there's a sense of community. I'm hearing a lot of good stories of people doing good things for each other and helping each other out. Find yourself some partners as well. Jen and I have partnered up. We realize, you know, if we join forces, we'll be able to access a lot more people and help out a lot more people. And so, and we've been doing that as well. Connect with your neighboring businesses. What are things you can do to share? Some success stories that you can share with your neighboring businesses. We need to sort of pull together in these times to help each other out. And I'll leave you with this one here. Over and over, let's see here, so over and over in these 75 years, our study has shown that people fared the best where the people who leaned into relationships with family, with friends, and with community. And so people will you will be more successful. You'll be more, you'll be able to navigate these unknown territories a lot more successfully if you lean into your community. And so with that, I will pass you over to Jen, my partner in crime in all of this, and it's over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Carolyn. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Hi everyone. Good morning. This is different times for most of us, and Carolyn and I talked about this before, and we know that not all of these, for me, the productivity tips are going to apply to everyone. There are 1,000 different situations that everybody has in their homes and working from home. Some people are working from home for the first time. Some people are working from home for the first time with kids home, spouses home. Some people are working at the office because they have to, but it's with like a tenth of the people they're used to working with. So that we clearly understand that there are a lot of different situations going on, and our intent is just try to give some helps and some tips and tricks on how we can get through this next few months or however long this is going to take. So for those people who are working from home for the very first time, it is really important, which you would think it would be an obvious thing, but it is really important to get a workspace set up, a dedicated workspace that is in a private area. If it could be a separate room, that would be great, with a door that could close, for a couple of reasons. One, so that you can actually try to get some focused work done, and we'll talk about that, but also so that you get into the routine still of going to work. You don't really want to be rolling out of bed and grabbing your laptop and sitting in bed or sitting on the floor, like some of these pictures, because first of all, ergonomically, it's not really good for you. So, and it's a bad habit to get in. So ideally, number one is find a space in your home or in your apartment, in your condo, where it is even if it's just a corner, which is the desk, that is your dedicated workspace. It just helps to get into that mental space of going to work. The second one is a routine. And it goes back to, it is easy to, work in your pajama pants all day on your laptop when people can only see you from the neck up anyway. So does it really matter if you have your slippers on or not? No. But a routine is really important mentally to stay in the work kind of mode. So, keep your routine. If you used to get up in the morning and work out and then come home, shower, eat breakfast, get dressed and go to work, continue to do that, but just go to your workspace that's in your home. So keep your same routine, get up when you did, work out as you can. Luckily, right now, we're still able to get outside and get that fresh air and go for a walk. So take advantage of that while we can. But keep that routine. It gets you in that mental space of going to work. There are some people actually who will do all of those things and then go outside, walk around the block and come back, just because they're kind of like going to work, but the commute isn't, there anymore. So they're staying at home, but keep the routine. It's really, really important. Communicate as often as possible with your colleagues and with your bosses. And Carolyn touched on this, but this is important. You're used to seeing these people every day. So, and we kind of, don't realize how often we communicate with other people when we're at work. We're walking down the hall, hey, how you doing? How's the weekend? How's that project? As we walk past people's desks, we are used to communicating a lot. And when we are now working remotely, that we're working a lot alone. So there are different technologies out there. There is the Zoom for the video meetings. There's Slack for communication. There's all kinds of different things. But we want to make sure we're communicating every day with our colleagues, especially if we're working on collaborative projects still. But also make sure you're touching base with your manager, your supervisor, your boss, whoever, and having a lot of communication back and forth. Boundaries are really important too when you're working from home. And what I mean by that is have your schedule, set your schedule, but it is easy to work way more than you usually would work when you work from home, because it's just there and it's easy to sit down at your computer and pick up something later on. So especially if you have families and children and things like that. You want to set boundaries around, these are my working hours. This is when I'm going to try to get my work done, and not end up working 24/7 because you can and because it's in your home now. That does actually happen to some people, and they work more than they ever did. So, maybe for you, your boundaries are, because you have children home, you would like to not work between 2 and 4 in the afternoon, but you'll make up that time at night. Communicate that with your supervisor, your boss, and see what works. What we're going to start seeing, I think, is a lot more focus on what is the output we need every day, what are the deliverables I need from today, and not how many hours you're sitting in the chair at your desk. A lot of organizations pay people to be present in the chair, and there's not a whole lot of productivity going on at the office. And so at home, if we have clear outputs and deliverables that we need every day, the number of hours that we spend on that might not matter as much. It might be, this is what we need accomplished today. Whether you throw in a lasagna, go for a walk in the afternoon with your kids, or do laundry, I don't care, as long as that work is getting done. So we're going to start seeing a little shift in that, I think. And online huddles are a great way to keep in touch. You could do this. You could do a Zoom meeting with your team and your supervisor, 5-10 minutes in the morning. Okay, guys, what are you working on? What are you doing? This is what I'm doing. This is what you're doing. You still get that visual high, and so you at least also hopefully get up, shower, get dressed, so that you're in the mind to go to work and have those huddles. And at the end of the day, you can have another 5-minute huddle. Really quickly, how did it go? What did we accomplish? Those types of things. It keeps you connected as a team to your colleagues. And it's interesting because, Harvard Business Review said that before this whole COVID-19 hit, a quarter of people in the US worked remotely from home already. So this is new for a lot of us, but there's a lot of organizations that have been doing this really well for a long time. So we just have to get used to the technology, which is, a little clunky for all of us, but once you get used to it, it's going to open up all kinds of new opportunities. Next slide, Carolyn. So in terms of employers, you might be managing a virtual team for the first time ever, and how do I do that, and how do I stay in touch with them? And there's a lot of challenges that people worry about in these situations. The most common ones are these: lack of face-to-face supervision. And that's a challenge or a concern on both sides. It's a concern for the employees because they could start to feel lack of support or lack of communication from the supervisor in that distance, which makes them feel uneasy and apprehensive. And also it's a concern and a challenge from many of the supervisors or managers' points of view, because they might feel that people will be working less when they're at home, that they're not going to be working as hard, that they're not going to be as productive. And in fact, prior to this situation, the COVID-19 situation where we were working in isolation, all of the research showed that when people worked from home, their productivity actually increased. So it's actually the opposite. People, when they were working from home, they were much more productive. They were getting more accomplished because of the number of interruptions that generally happen at work and in the workplaces. So now this is different now because we are home with animals, we've got children, we've got spouses, and so there's a few different things there. But in general, it's not that people are not more productive. So there's going to be that concern of that lack of face-to-face, which is why Carolyn mentioned the communication every day with all employees is key. And if we can do it all together in those online huddles, that saves time, and we still have that. Access to information is another one. We're all going to just have to relax a little bit and realize that it might be slower to get the information we need. It's much easier to get up and walk down the hall and ask somebody in their office a question. We can't do that right now. And so we have to email or text or call and then wait for that information to come back. So we're going to have to be a little patient with how long it might take to get information. By the same token, we don't have access to the information of how people are feeling. If you got an email or something, or someone said something to you and it sounded a little bit off or a little bit curt, or you're like, geez, something's up with that colleague of mine today. I wonder if they're okay. You don't have that ability to know what's going on with them today because you're not going to probably see them. A lot of it'll be through email and tech and that sort of thing. So again, take the emails and the tone and all of the things with a grain of salt, and just we need to understand that people are dealing with this the best they can. Social isolation is another one, obviously. A lot of us are extroverts. I saw, there's a lot of jokes going around Facebook, and some of them are pretty good, but I saw one the other day that said, hey, introverts, put your book down and check on your extroverts. They're not doing okay. And that's me. I like to be out and talking to people all the time and working with groups of people. So it's harder for certain people than others, and we just have to pay attention and keep an eye on our colleagues. And if you're a supervisor, manager, you got to keep an eye on your staff, especially as this goes in to more days, weeks, and months. Some organizations are having, a social hour every Friday for an hour. They'll do a meeting like this, but it's not work related. It's just how you make it out. How are the kids? What are some of the fun things you're doing this week? Some, if they have the ability, have gone so far as to, send pizza to their team's houses so that they could all have a pizza party together. That's great if you're working and your business is up and running and making money and that sort of thing. A lot of us can't do that right now, but there's a lot of different ways that you can do that to try to mitigate the social isolation. Rules of engagement are really important, and what that means is when this starts, and there's some people who've been working from home for 2 or 3 weeks, and there's others who are just starting now, and it's really important for the leaders.
Everybody who's on the call, but there's a lot of people on this call, so you won't see everybody.
Oh, so I'm sorry, I could hear someone. There's a lot of people who are just starting this now. And so it's really important for the leaders and the management and those types of people. Is everybody on mute?
Yes, now
Okay.
everybody's in mute.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. As the leader, make sure you set the rules of engagement out with your team and ask them, what's going to work for you, what's going to work for us. We're going to have a 10-minute or a 5 to 10-minute check-in call in the morning. We're all going to talk about what we're working on today. We'll get back together at 4:30 in the afternoon. I expect you to send me a check-in during the day. Whatever the rules are of your team, make sure they're really clear for your staff. It's the unknown that makes people start to worry of, I haven't heard from my boss in 2 days, or these sorts of things. We want to be clear on how we're going to work together. So that's an employer's role. And then lastly, if you can put a plan, do, check, act cycle in place with your team, and that goes hand in hand with those huddles. A 5-minute huddle in the morning online. What's our plan for today? Okay, that sounds great. We go and do it. And at the end of the day, we check, how did we make out? And what do we need to fix or, work on so that tomorrow, it works better. We're all learning. It's all new to everybody. And so we just want to make sure that we're all, have as much information as we can from our bosses and our supervisors. Next slide. And just lastly, a few productivity tips in general. These work, whether you're still working in your office or if you're working at home, different things. We need to just give everybody a break right now. There is a lot of stress and a lot of uncertainty about how this is going to work. And, even I have friends who are trying to work and homeschool their kids at the same time. And we just have to make sure that everyone understands we're all trying our best. So every day, some of the tips are to pick your top 3 things that you have to get done today, or are the most important things for you. And that is your success list. We all have a 10 or 20 page to-do list of things, but that can be overwhelming and it can be too much. So just every day, these are the top 3 things that I'm going to get done today, and that means it's a success for me. And make sure that you identify what those are. Second is don't fight nature. Our memories and our brains are really tired right now, and they're dealing with a lot, and they're dealing with all the stuff that Carolyn told you about. And we're trying to work at the same time. Start writing things down. Your brains are great for having ideas. They're not great for keeping them. We're forgetting a lot of things because of the nature of what's going on. So make sure that you're writing down everything and you're keeping track of things. It's one less thing that you have to think about, one last thing you have to worry about. Take note that the time of day that you're most productive. There is a lot of people, actually it's about 75% of people, who are absolutely the most productive between early morning and noon. The most unproductive time of day for these people is between 2 and 4 in the afternoon. So there is a lack of mental clarity, a lack of judgment, a lack of productivity. There's a lot of research done that really you should do no important work between 2 and 4 in the afternoon. And so those top 3 things that you want to get done, get them done in the morning. It's when it's most alert, you've got the most focus. and you'll be the most productive, which means you'll get them done sooner. If you try to do these things later in the afternoon, it's going to drag on. The quality won't be as great. So maybe as employers, you know, you gotta give your employees a little break and let them start maybe having chunks of the day where they can go do other things and then come back when they're fresh and get that work done. No multitasking. You can't multitask anyway. You can only focus on one thing at a time, but don't try to be doing 3 or 4 things at once. Focus on one thing, put it in your calendar, you know, between 9 and 10, I'm doing this thing, 10 and 11, and I'm focusing on that, and turn off all notifications on your dinging and bigging and vibrating on your phones and your laptops. Every time those things go off, it interrupts you and you have to go back and start over again to where you were. And that is a real deal breaker for your productivity. Work 45 minutes and take a break for 15. We can only really focus so long on getting something done. So when you're working on those really important items, you know, set your clock for 45 minutes, hunker down, turn everything off, get that done, and then get up. We should always, you know, take a break every hour, have a stretch, get a snack, whatever it is. And the last thing to leave you with is right now is an absolute brilliant time to start your stop doing list. All of the things that seemed really important 3.5 weeks ago at work, a lot of them don't seem so important right now. There's certain things that absolutely are, and there's new things now that are really important. But we all generally in our worlds and in our businesses and what we do tend to do a lot of things because that's what we were told to do, or because that's the way we've always done it, and we don't question why are we doing this. So in this upheaval of time, it is a brilliant opportunity to start questioning all the things that you do in the run of a day in the business and say, why are we doing this? What value is it creating? Who's using it? And start tracking, because it's a great time to start looking at what we should stop doing so that we can focus on the more important productive things. And so I really think at the end of the day, what this entire situation is going to highlight is that our ability to adapt, excuse me, and change the way we work. For years, I have heard management teams and leaders say, we can't do it like that. That'll never work. That's ridiculous. People can't work from home. We can't change that. It's always worked this way. What this situation is proving to us is that we actually can work differently because we've been forced to. But in the end, a lot of us should think about, after this passes, how can we start using some of these new processes and new ways of doing things a little bit better? There is the autonomy and empowerment that comes from folks having the choice of working from home or flexible work environments and that sort of thing. All the research shows it increases productivity, it increases staff satisfaction, it increases all those things that we're looking for. So really try to take advantage of that. And yeah, that's about it. Oh, the last thing, if you have dogs at home and children at home, this is a big one I keep asking about. That's tricky, but you know, there's a few different things. If you have children at home and they're younger, try to get some larger projects for them to do, puzzles, crafts, things like that, to give you some time to focus. For example, I have a dog who likes to bark her head off every time another dog walks by. So before this happened, we took her for a long walk to try to tire her out, and we closed the blinds so that she couldn't see the dogs walking by, so she wouldn't be barking while I was doing this webinar. Older children, you know, you can at least explain to them what's going on, and you need some time. You can put a little red, yellow, green on your office door of whether they can come in or not. If it's really important, there's a red on my door right now, you can't come in behind me because I'm doing this. So there are lots of tips and tricks, and yeah, and I'm going to end by saying, if you have any other questions for Carolyn or I after we do the Q&A right now, feel free to reach out to us. Our emails will be on the final slide, and we have created a number of webinars around these topics as well, hour-long webinars for people if they want them specifically for their businesses, with a lot more information than this high-level one that we've just done for you. But thank you for your time.
Thanks, Jen, and thanks, Carolyn. That was great. Really good advice. You'll be happy to know, Jen, that I locked my 2 cats in the kitchen before we started.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
It's a thing.
Yeah, they would be making a guest appearance here on Zoom. Just to Carolyn's point about the push-up challenge, that kind of scared me. So I was happy that Jen also mentioned the importance of a social hour. And maybe at the end of the week, we should all do a virtual wine toast with our teams just to keep morale up. Now is the time for you, if you'd like to pose a question to either Carolyn or Jen. And while we're waiting for some of those, please use the chat function, by the way, the chat button at the bottom of the screen. I have one question just to kick things off. Unfortunately, I'm sure many of the people on the call have had the unfortunate task of having to lay off some of their people, even temporarily. Can you talk a little bit about, keeping in touch with those people? It's a bit of an awkward thing. You've just told them, I'm sorry, I can't pay you. I need to lay you off for the foreseeable future, but you still want to make that connection, I'm sure.
Absolutely. I think it's important. That's a good point, John. Certainly there's many of you on the call that probably have colleagues or people that you've had to lay off on a temporary basis, or maybe even down the road, it might be on a permanent basis. I would definitely encourage you to stay in touch with them and encourage the other team members to stay in touch with them as well. They need to still feel like they're part of this community. They will understand. They know what's going on. It's out of your control right now, so they're likely not bitter towards you. And the fact that if you make the efforts to reach out to them and stay in touch with them and just checking in will probably go a long way, especially if and when they come back. They will remember that. And keeping them posted as well. If it's just a temporary layoff, keeping them engaged, keeping them up to date with what is really important to do.
Jen, I don't know if you want to add anything or.
Well, I actually just saw one thing, unless it's already too late for that, but some organizations have been, if they've already, if they know they have to lay off, then they'll sit down and help their employees figure out how to apply for the EI, what do I, qualify for. So rather than just, sorry, this is the situation, there's the door, they're actually physically helping them apply for, so they're not just leaving them to go figure it out on their own. They're walking through that process and literally holding their hand through it to make sure that they get what they need in the meantime. I thought that was great. And there's a few others that if they're thinking of they had to lay off, but they were trying not to. Some were sitting down with their employees and being very honest and saying, look, what can we do? And, is there any ways that we can all hurt a little bit so that some of us don't hurt a lot? And so, some groups have taken reduced hours across the board so that we didn't have to lay off these 3 people and the other 2 get to stay, different things like that. But it goes to show the true human spirit in these situations. If you bring people a problem, they will try to help you with it. So some are being vulnerable that way. Like Carolyn said, the importance of vulnerability and talking to their staff and saying, I don't know what to do. And I don't want to do this. Is there any other way that we can decide together? Sometimes that's not a possibility, but that's some other options.
Mm-hmm. I think if we look at the glass half full during this crisis, there might be some things that we learn about how we work that we can continue to apply after the pandemic passes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. I'd encourage anyone who wants to leave a question to use the chat function. I want to mention that somebody asked off the top if we're recording the session, and yes, we are. And it will be posted probably within, I would say, 24 hours on the Chamber's website. If any of you were on yesterday's webinar with Jeanette Pettipas-Taylor and Chantal Lepage from Service Canada, that webinar is now on the website. If you click on the COVID-19 resource page, you'll see the video frame there, and we'll be doing the same with this one. And I'm sure both Carolyn and Jennifer would encourage and welcome any follow-up questions. You may want to approach them individually because that's we're all sort of managing this on the fly. There's no really great manual for this, but we'll do the best we can. Okay, there's a question here. Somebody said there's also a work share program that people can access where at least 2 employees can participate in, reduced hours and an EA uptake. I don't know if you can talk about that.
Well, that is available. I'm not an expert in that area. I know yesterday's session with Jeanette and Chantal, they covered a little bit of what those programs are, but there are opportunities there. Just to add on to what Jen was talking about when, reaching out to your team and finding out what you can do to reduce the hurt. There's also, I've heard of companies that have just given a pay cut to everyone so that they can sustain and not have to terminate. But there's definitely programs there where there's the, I think it's the supplemental unemployment benefit program, that even if you're not registered right now, I think they've taken away the requirements, and people can still, if they register, and they can use that benefit for employees. So it's basically a top up from my understanding. Again, I don't want to be quoted on all this, but there are some programs there to help alleviate some of those cutbacks.
There's another question here. It's a good one. It says, if you work in a, quote, helping field, a nonprofit or a charity, for example, some staff are really struggling with not being able to actively help anymore. Do you have any suggestions for the helpers, for those people who don't have any access to the people they traditionally have helped?
So helping the helpers, essentially?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if you're their leader or you're their peer, you can reach out to them and provide some if they need to talk about it. I don't know if you have access to EFAPs, as I mentioned earlier, employee and family assistance programs. That's free. That's if your company has those with your benefits, it's free to the employees, and they can talk to a counselor online. And encourage them to open up and talk to you. Maybe even create a group chat for the helpers, sort of like a check-in point where everyone can sign in and just vent and talk about some of the challenges they're experiencing and what they can, how they can help each other out. Sort of that support group network. Mm-hmm. Reaching out to other folks in the business community that might have similar problems, and exchanging some tips and tools that may work. Those might be certain things you can do to help out, but just showing that you care and that you're aware and that you're checking in with them is the first step, and finding some ideas, and they might have some ideas as well as what they think that could help them. Mm-hmm.
And some helpers could find other new ways to help. There's a lot of new things that were not an issue a month ago, that if these are people who, that is what their purpose is, and their personal purpose is to help others, and now they can't do that. There's other, like the seniors in your neighborhood, or the folks who trying to help your community in different ways. There's different new ways that we got to start thinking about how we can help other people.
Yeah. And there's also we're seeing a lot of online training that's available. Maybe do some research and find out which organizations may be providing some assistance there. Jen and I are also both associates of LearnSphere, and LearnSphere is putting out a whole bunch of sessions that are, helping people navigate through this. And this could be very applicable to those helpers who need help.
Mm-hmm. Somebody posted something which is I think a good idea. That first of all, they thanked you for the good session, and maybe there's an opportunity I think we have 55 or so people online here, to create our own little support group of companies and leaders who need to talk to each other about how they can help their employees during this crisis time. So, normally we don't share a registration list, but maybe we could set something up where we can form an ongoing group out of this.
Absolutely. I love that idea. That's a great idea. And if I'd encourage anyone else have some ideas or things that they're doing right now that's working and that you want to share with the rest of the community, mm-hmm. Please feel free. We'd love to hear from you as well. What's working, or what you can do to help out others. You might have some resources that could help your peers in the business community.
Right. If there was ever a time for best practice sharing, it's right now, I think.
Absolutely. We're all in this together.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
I even know competitors who are working together now. I mean, this is a new world. This is nothing like any of us have ever seen or dealt with before. So the like those things that seemed so important weeks ago, and you know, not sharing too much with your competitor, but that's all out the window. Everyone's in this together to, you know, we don't want to fight over the pie. We want to grow the pie and figure out how we can all come out the other side. So,
Right.
Yeah, that's great idea.
So the last three comments all said, love that idea. So I think we're on to something here. So we'll take that as an action item as we leave today's session. I don't know if there are any other questions. If not, I think what we'll do is close things off. I just want to thank everybody for participating today. Jen and Carolyn, really great advice. Thanks for your time. I know you quickly put together something, and it's really impressive. And we'll take that idea of this little support group away, and we'll get back to you on that. And I want to ask those people who are on the call, if you have other ideas about webinars that we can present during this time, please let us know. We did one yesterday with on federal government assistance, today on HR and helping people working remotely. I'm thinking we'll likely do something around the province and what it has announced, and maybe are there some gaps there, but we're open to whatever you can do. So with that, thanks again, everybody, for attending. Have a good day. Be productive. Remember to, between 2 and 4, don't do anything too stressful, because other than maybe take a nap, I don't know.
Yep.
Thanks for attending today. Thanks, Carolyn and Jen. Merci encore d'avoir participé aujourd'hui. Have a good day, and everybody stay safe.
Merci.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.